Stay with me. We'll beat this.
I'm your host, Dr. Jan Hittleman. Thanks so much for being here with us tonight. We have a very important topic on our show. Our topic is adolescent depression. And many of you in the audience may not be aware, but Colorado is actually the #1 state in the country. We have more teen depression than any other state in the country. And while it's very difficult to understand, what's important is that we do what we need to take care of our kids and to have some increased awareness in terms of some of the symptoms of depression, what we should do if we have concerns. And we have a wonderful panel to help us with this very important topic this evening. I want to first thank our sponsors for making this show possible, our partners, the BVSD School District and Channel 22, as well as our other sponsors, the Parent Engagement Network, the Boulder Counseling Cooperative, the Hope Coalition, the Broomfield Public Library System, the Boulder Public Library System, Centennial Peaks Hospital, the Boulder County Healthy Youth Alliance, the Daily Camera. Thank you all for your sponsorship. Without your help, we could not bring this free programming to our community. Let me start by introducing our panel. Our first panelist is Dr. Bill Marine. Bill and his wife Susan have lived in Boulder since 1981. Bill retired from the CU Health Science Center as Professor Emeritus in Preventative Medicine in July 2000. Since the loss of his stepson and daughter to suicide, the latter in 2007, he and his wife have become active in suicide prevention activities in our community. He was a charter member of the board of Second Wind of Boulder County, which started in 2009 and is now the president of that board. And Bill is going to give us a little bit more information about that wonderful resource, the Second Wind of Boulder County. We're also joined by a couple of students tonight. We're really excited to have them with us. Our first student is Anya Kolesnikov. I've been practicing pronouncing Anya's name. Anya is a senior and an IB diploma candidate at Fairview High School. She was born in Boulder, and in college she plans to study theater and film. We're also joined by Ian Pyle. Ian's been involved in suicide prevention and depression awareness for the past 2 years. He's currently a senior at Fairview High School and a member of Coley's Closet's leadership team. And Anya and Ian are going to help us learn more about this wonderful program of Coley's Closet and all the great things that they do in our community. We're also joined by Julie Youngman. Julie is a community liaison with Centennial Peaks Hospital in Louisville, which offers patient and intensive outpatient programs for adults and adolescents. Julie is a licensed clinical social worker by background, has 10 years of experience working with adolescents and children in school, residential, and community mental health settings. And Julie at one time actually was a school interventionist, I think, here in the Boulder Valley School District. Welcome, Julie. And finally, we're really pleased to have Michael O'Neill. Michael has been at Southern Hills Middle School in Boulder for 18 years, first starting as a science teacher and then as a school counselor for the last 11 years. Welcome. Before we get started, there's a video that I'm hoping we can show you that kind of gives you a little bit of a primer on adolescent depression. So let's watch that, and then we'll bring it back to our panel for discussion. While we're getting the video ready, one of the things that you want to pay attention to in this video are some of the symptoms and warning signs of depression, which we're going to elaborate on. I also want to let you know that we have a opportunity for you to ask questions directly to our panel as well. We would love to have your involvement in this important topic. And if you would like to participate, all you need to do is go to our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com, and click on the Submit Questions icon. And then your question will come right to us here for our telecast, and we will include it.
Has your child suffered from depression? Nearly 2 million American teenagers are diagnosed with this condition, but far too many also go undiagnosed. Here's our senior health and medical editor, Dr. Richard Besser, on how you can better understand the issues of teenage depression.
I didn't wake up that day knowing I was going to try and take my own life.
I just would spend hours just crying and having suicidal thoughts.
I ended up cutting to the point that I needed stitches. I don't want anyone to ever have to be in my shoes.
I figured that if I just disappeared, that it would make everything better for everyone else.
Teens have a reputation, moody and angst-ridden. But it may surprise you that 20% of teens experience real depression. That's about 2 million teenagers. What is it like to be depressed during one of the most tumultuous times of your life? I sat down with 5 teenagers for a frank discussion about their experiences.
Francesca, when did you first realize you were depressed?
My whole demeanor had really changed. I was irritable, I was not motivated, I was losing interest in all the things I had previously enjoyed.
A teen's depression is not the same as an adult's. Teens often feel irritable, not sad. Dr. Harold Koplowitz is a child psychiatrist.
So the signs of teen depression is that it lasts for more than 2 weeks, and there's a change in appetite, a change in sleep, a change in concentration, a change in mood, and most importantly, a change in the ability to really enjoy things.
All of a sudden, I was just really tired. It took twice as much energy to get out of bed, like brush my teeth, go do the things I loved.
How long did it take for someone to say, hey, Casey, something's different here?
Towards the end of 8th grade, my sister started noticing that I was wearing long sleeves and like there were cuts on my arms and we didn't have a cat.
Casey was cutting, literally cutting her skin with sharp objects. It's a symptom of depression.
Many times people do it because they feel the desire to feel alive. They feel so numb from the depression that cutting themselves makes them feel alive.
I ended up cutting to the point that I needed stitches. I didn't want to feel that way. I didn't want to die, but I wanted to feel something other than what I was feeling, even if it was pain.
Like many teens, Casey suffered in silence. The shame in admitting she needed help was too powerful.
For so many conditions, mental health conditions, certainly stigma has been a big barrier for people getting help.
This here is probably the most honest talk that I've been a part of in a long time, and it's a shame because stigma is so strong.
I guess I haven't had the courage to completely just come out and say that I have depression, I guess. It just scares me a little bit how I would be viewed.
There is a lot of resistance to medication, that taking an antidepressant is somehow cheating.
My psychiatrist explained it to me in the best way possible. You're not depending on it just to make you happy. Your brain works differently. And for me, it's difficult for me to do the everyday things that people take for granted. So that pill is making sure that I can do the things that jumpstart my day so that I can do the things that make me happy.
Studies show that early treatment, whether with medication or talk therapy, may prevent further episodes. Remember, depression isn't an attitude a teen is choosing. It's a serious and real brain disorder.
If you broke your arm, you go to the doctor. So if you're depressed, which is an illness, shouldn't you go to the doctor? Shouldn't you get help? Why is it any different? It should be treated the same way because it is an illness.
Maggie isn't depressed, but her brother was. She was 12 when he took his own life in 2003.
Every single day I have to wake up and I don't have my brother. And maybe things could have been differently. So it's not something to be taken lightly, just pushed under the carpet.
It won't go away if you ignore it.
No.
Depression can be hidden, like it was for Maggie's brother. And unrecognized depression can lead to suicide. In fact, it's the 3rd leading cause of death for people ages 14 to 24. Over 600,000 teens make an attempt every year.
I don't think there's anything that is more difficult for people to talk about than suicide. Suicidal thoughts, is it something that you've experienced with your depression? You all have.
The way my emotions used to work is like a rubber band. I could extend for a really long period of time, but when I let go, I snapped.
That's what happened the day his parents found the stash of alcohol he had been hiding.
And so that was the night that I tried to take my own life by going out of my 9-story bedroom window.
It's a miracle that Jordan survived. Along with other major injuries, he shattered his leg and still uses a cane today.
Are you glad you survived?
I feel extremely fortunate to be alive, and that was the first thought in my mind when I woke up. I'm so happy to survive that. I know just what kind of a miracle that is.
There is hope.
If there's one thing that you want people to take away in terms of teenage depression.
If you're having a rough time, if you're going through rough stuff, you're not alone. I mean, life's hard. You know, I mean, it is what it is, but you may not know about it, but there's so many resources out there, things that can help you out.
Don't be afraid to talk to somebody. You might think it's gonna be scary and there might be bad consequences, but it is so much better to talk about it. Like, getting help is incredibly important. You might be able to get through it yourself, but having that extra support system can save your life.
The good news about depression, it can be treated.
I used to think you could only suffer from depression because that's what we all.
There you have it. We're gonna talk more about some of the issues that were brought up in the video, but I want to first get a little bit more information from our panelists. And you know, we're very fortunate here in Boulder because we have the opportunity to provide some really great resources, and we're going to hear about some of those resources tonight. I notice on the screen, Lisa, it still has, oh, there we go. So let's start with our first panelist, Dr. Bill Marine. As I mentioned in the introduction, Bill's done a lot in the community actually around depression and suicide prevention, but the hat that he's wearing tonight is as the president of the board of the Second Wind Fund of Boulder County. And Bill, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that organization.
Sure, Jan. We are an affiliate of the Second Wind Fund, Inc., which was started back about 12 years ago because one school had 4 suicides in a single year. And the church leaders and schools leaders and counselors got together and came up with this model, which we are using here in Boulder County with both Boulder Valley School District and in the last year with St. Vrain School District. And that model relates to linking help to kids who are of low income and have no insurance resources. And this is done through using the school interventionists who are contracted with the Boulder Valley and St. Vrain Valley contracts with mental health partners, just like Julie was an interventionist up until last few months ago. And we get our calls from the interventionists in the schools of kids who are suicidal. And our job is within 24 hours to put them in touch with a counselor who will has agreed beforehand to work at a somewhat reduced rate. We pay the counselor, and they receive sessions. The individuals receive sessions up to 20, but certainly the first 8 sessions are guaranteed, and depending on whether they need it more, they get more. And that is an agreement then between our executive director, who's half-time, gets the not the names of the individual, but the names of the interventionist, who then is in touch with the family and the child.
And this is a free service, correct, Bill?
Free service, free service.
Which is incredible. These are licensed mental health professionals who are available through Second Wind Fund to provide this free therapeutic service to adolescents in the community.
Yes, we've worked with 90 children so far in the last 4 years.
And my understanding, Bill, is that the referrals really need to come from the interventionists.
Most of them do, but we are, as we've gotten to know the schools better, counselors can do the same thing, as well as parents can directly refer to our executive director. But we primarily work with the interventionists because they know when somebody is suicidal and needs help.
Right. And I can also tell you, if you want to find out more about Second Wind Fund of Boulder, you can go to www.swf bc, I believe, .org. And I also want the audience to know that we've prepared a handout that's available on our website that you can download, and it has a lot of useful information. It goes over the warning signs of depression, which we're going to certainly discuss tonight, adolescent risk factors, national and local resources, including Second Wind contact information, as well as the other organizations that are represented here tonight, and additional organizations that aren't here. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in that information, to go to our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com, go to the library section, and you'll see it under one of our handouts there, and you can download it at no charge.
Jan, I'd like to say that we have received a lot of support from local foundations, either through grant request or donations, and we're now working toward trying to increase individual donations. And we're having a walk-run on the 28th of April, and I think the camera can zero in on this, and it's called Emerge. It's going to be at the Boulder Reservoir on the 28th, and the morning of the 28th, the registration starts at 8:30 and the event starts at 9:30. And you can either register through our website, which is swfdc.org, as Jan said, or through runningguru.com. And you can see that on the bottom of the poster.
And that's runningguru.com/event/emerge.
Right. Emerge is the helping our youth soar.
And you know, it's important for us to support organizations like this because we're very lucky to have these resources for our kids. So please take a look at that website, and if you can help support it, please do. Thank you, Bill. I'm going to come back to you, I'm sure, very soon. I'd like to hear a little bit now from our two high school representatives who are involved with a wonderful program called Coley's Closet. And I'm going to let them explain this a little bit more. So I don't know if Anya, you want to get started, or Ian?
So this is my first year in Coley's Closet. And basically what it is it's a group that was started several years ago by a teenager in response to the suicide of her cousin. And since then, it's blossomed a lot. It's become a peer education group. So there's a big group of us. We go into schools, high schools, middle schools, when we're requested by teachers, and we give presentations to their students about teen suicide and depression, warning signs, risk factors.
Mm-hmm.
We also do fundraising for the Second Wind Fund so that we can help get the kids that we talk to in classes the help that they need if they have depression or need therapy.
Basically, our goal is to get the word out to kids that of all the signs of depression and suicide and how to help out your friends. So we talk to the kids a lot about, like, what are the resources you can find in your community and what are some ways you can help them out yourself, and then also, you know, finding other resources. So basically that's what we do. We go to middle and high schools and tell those kids about how to get help for a friend and whatnot.
And I'm guessing you both have done that.
Yes.
As part of your experience at Coley's Closet. Is it difficult to do? I mean, what's your experience been?
I would say that we're very well prepared when we go into the classrooms. We're not at all, you know, unprepared for what we're doing. We've all been trained and we know everything that we're talking about. And of course there is an adult there, so if something should come up that we can't handle, it's there's someone there to take care of it. So I think I've always had good experiences presenting. It's never been stressful or scary for me. What about you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sort of a little bit more eased in because I've been a part of Coley's for 2 years now, and I'm on the leadership team, so I definitely have had a lot of experience in the classroom. And you know, when the kids get started, it's a little nerve-wracking at first because you're presenting for the first time, but once you start getting into the rhythm and once you learn the presentation back and forth like I have, and I'm sure Anya does too, it becomes pretty easy, and it's actually a great experience. I love presenting to the kids. And, you know, like every class I can always see like one or two looks on the kids' faces of like, wow, like I did not know that. And now that I know that, that'll help a lot with what I'm dealing with maybe a family member or friend. So I love presenting, and I think it's an amazing experience.
Not to put you on the spot, but what kind of things do the teens seem surprised about that they don't know?
A lot of kids don't know actually how much this topic is relevant in our state. So Colorado is currently 8th on the United States list of like most suicides. So they're the most committed suicides, 8th most committed suicides in Colorado. And the Rocky Mountain region is the highest for depression and suicide rates. So the kids don't know that this topic is actually very close to home for them. So that's a big.
And along those lines, you know, in the little video we saw, it talked about how suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death of teenagers, but in Colorado it's actually the 2nd. So it really shows us how in our community it's a real issue. Something to add?
Sure, I can attest to the effectiveness of the presentations. Every year when you come to Southern Hills Middle School, either a student will be stirred realizing that they're farther along the depression spectrum than they thought, or they realize their friend is farther along. And it's sometimes the same day or the next day or the next week. I frequently get 1 to 4 students with some concerns.
And do you notice a difference after the presentation?
It's directly as a result.
Is that what you mean, as a result?
Yeah.
So that must be very rewarding for the staff to be able to, you know, kind of identify the kids that need that extra support.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of the students that are feeling that way will not come out. They don't quite realize how bad it is, or they don't have the motivation or the internal drive to start, you know, getting some help. So it's often a result of somebody else noticing, or teachers noticing, or just, you know, we're seeing some signs.
And would you agree, Michael, that there's a real power to having youth present information to fellow youth versus an adult coming in and giving a very similar presentation?
Absolutely. They listen to their peers or near peers much more than they will a bunch of adults.
I'd like to say that there's in Coley's Closet has become very important to Second Wind because they do attack the stigma so much directly by peer education. And we have routinely have somebody on our board from Coley's Closet to help us make that link and to continue forging that ahead.
And I'm curious from the Coley's folks that are here, what if I'm a student that has some interest in getting involved? Is it really tough? What do I have to do? Maybe you could help us with that.
Not at all. Actually, we'll have a meeting in April for students who are interested in joining for the next year. How it works is every year towards the beginning of the school year, there will be a training session where you'll come get all the information you need to present. And in order to participate in Coley's for that next school year, you need to come to the training session so that you can be trained in how to present. And then from there, it's very easy. Just come to the meetings twice a month, and you can sign up for presentations and go into schools and talk about suicide and depression.
Fantastic. I also know there's another organization in the community that ties in very closely with Second Wind as well as Coley's Closet, and that's called the Hope Coalition of Boulder County, and we have their website information on our handout as well that you can get from our website. And myself and Dr. Marine, we've been involved a little bit with Hope Coalition in the past, so I just want to mention briefly what Hope Coalition does. It's a very grassroots group. They meet regularly here in Boulder. Again, you can find out a lot more information about them by going to their website. And let me tell you what that is. It's on the handout as well. But it is Hope Coalition Boulder. One word, hopecoalitionboulder.org. And they do a lot of training for what are called gatekeepers. So these are, and it's pretty much all of us, but people that come in contact with folks that might be at risk for suicide or depression. And they do a training because one of the issues that comes up with this, and I'm curious to hear from the Coley's Closet students as well about this, because I'm sure they talk about it, is there's a real reluctance to talk about suicide. If you're involved with a friend or a relative, you have some concerns about them, it can be very difficult to bring up that subject. Some people also worry that by talking about it, it increases the odds of it happening. That is absolutely not true, although a lot of people think it's true. And so the Hope Coalition really helps people in terms of information as well as training to kind of know what to say and what to do, whether you're a bus driver in the school district or a teacher, or you work with kids of any age, a parent, work with scouts. I mean, a lot of us are gatekeepers without necessarily knowing it. The other important information that Hope Coalition shares is that, it's not your job to help the person deal with their depression, but what's great is if you can connect them with resources to help them. So if you're a student at school and you have a concern about a friend, going to the guidance counselor would be a wonderful idea. And maybe go with your friend if your friend's anxious about going by themselves, but to help connect them to resources, because we do know that depression is treatable for the vast majority of people. But unfortunately, it's estimated in the United States, for example, that only 40% of teens who have depression ever get treatment at all. And we really want to see those numbers increase, especially here in Boulder County. There are times where the depression is severe, and the suicidal thinking is severe, and we need to take action to keep that person safe. And one of the options that we are very fortunate to have in the community is Centennial Peaks Hospital. Centennial Peaks Hospital is in Louisville. It's a psychiatric facility. And if I'm working with a patient and I have concerns about their safety, it's a wonderful resource that I'm able to use and have that patient go to Centennial Peaks Hospital, do an assessment. I believe there's no charge for that assessment. And if needed, they can spend some time at the hospital, perhaps get on medication and get the treatment they need. And I'd love to hear more about what's going on there and also how people can access those services from Julie Youngman, who's here with us, who works at Centennial Peaks Hospital.
Thanks, Jan. You did a good job describing it. So we right now do inpatient and intensive outpatient treatment for adolescents, so ages 13 to 17. And people will come to us as referred by private practitioners from schools. Parents will call us if they're concerned that their child is experiencing significant depression, or if they've talked about suicidal ideation or other things that raise their parents' eyebrows to a point where they want them to be checked out by a mental health professional. We're lucky in our community that there's schools and our school counselors, the interventionists are very great access points for parents, and Centennial Peaks is another one. If parents are concerned about their student or their child and would like them to be assessed to see if they need inpatient care, which is one of the things we do, or if not, then we'll make recommendations for other levels of care that might be appropriate. As Jan mentioned, there's no cost for that assessment. That's just something that we do for the community as part of our mission also to help keep kids safe and help get them through to graduation and beyond. So the access point for us with that is our intake department. It's open 24/7, which is another thing for parents to know about. It can be tough on weekends or evenings when the school who you might go to first, where your school professionals aren't there. So Centennial Peaks has an intake department that's always open, and our phone number is 303-666-2088. Our intensive outpatient programs are another way that we work with kids if they're experiencing high levels of depression or anxiety as well, or other kind of mental health diagnoses, and that's a program that's group therapy format. It's 3 times a week, 3 hours per time, and really focused on skill building, coping strategies as far as dealing with distress, healthy communication with your family, and developing ways to cope with emotions as they happen, because as we know, as you guys know, as the teenagers experiencing them, and the rest of us know as having made it through teenagerdom, it's a time of really extreme emotions, whether that's sadness or other emotions. So we work with kids at the end of the spectrum that really are requiring acute levels of care. And then we've also partnered recently with a group called Jason Foundation. That's a youth suicide prevention group. It was started by a man in Tennessee after his 16-year-old son died by suicide. And this person, Clark Flatt, whose son was the one who passed away, really felt frustrated that as a parent he didn't know more about the warning signs, that he had gone to parent nights and he had been educated and he had worked hard to know what to watch for, and felt like suicide in youth was really a silent epidemic. It was happening and it wasn't being talked about. So we've partnered with Jason Foundation so that we can offer no-cost educational materials. So to groups, I've talked to dance group instructors who work with adolescents. We can work with students, college students, or educators or coaches and parents too, just to really make sure that the education is happening out there, that people know what to look for and are then able to connect to school, to faith communities, to mental health practitioners, to pediatricians, to all those people we have in our community. We're lucky in Boulder County that we have a great community for both prevention and for treatment. So it's really helping parents and other adults and other kids know what to look for and how to help access supports for that person.
And if a family is looking for an assessment there, Julie, I'm assuming it's helpful for them to give a call first before they come to the hospital?
Yeah, we recommend it. It helps us know kind of what to plan on. Hopefully the waits won't be that long. We try to keep them as short as possible. And we know it's a really hard process to have to go to a place that's called a hospital when you're worried about your child for depression. But we also kind of look at it from the teen on the video brought up, if you had a broken arm, you would go get it checked out. And I think about that a lot with mental health, that parents, I think, often expect themselves just to know or just to be able to guess. And giving us a call is one way that you can get it checked out by a neutral party. Again, calling ahead helps us, but we're going to do what we can to take care of kids and families if kind of in whatever way that we can.
And what age clients do you serve at the hospital?
For adolescents, it's 13 to 17, but we actually serve from 13 to about 65. So we have 72 beds total, so it's a pretty big hospital. And often people don't even know that it's tucked away. It's right next to a Vista in Louisville, but we're our own place right next door. And
very close to Monarch High School.
Yeah, right by Monarch High and right by Monarch K-8.
That's right.
Yep, right across the street from those. We work a lot. We're really lucky. Our school counselors and school interventionists in Boulder County, St. Vrain and Boulder Valley, are very well educated. They know how to help families and students access Centennial Peaks if that's appropriate, or other resources if not. So we work a lot with the local school counselors like Michael and others in the area, which is a great partnership. I mean, we often hope that we can make it as easy for parents and for their kids as they're going through, because it's tough and it's scary, and it's our job to answer as many questions as we can and make it as accessible as we can.
Thank you, Julie. And I mentioned in the introductions that Julie at one time was a school interventionist here in the Boulder Valley School District. And I just want to talk a little bit about the interventionist program, because it's another fantastic resource that we have here in Boulder Valley. And I don't know that you should talk about it, Julie, because that's earlier in your career. I don't know, but feel free to jump in.
Okay.
And is there an interventionist at Southern Hills? I wasn't sure, Michael.
There is, yes.
Is it something you could talk about a little bit in terms of what their function is and how it works?
Sure. It's my understanding is that the position is funded partly by Boulder Valley and partly by Boulder County, or perhaps City of Boulder.
Mental health partners.
Great.
Yeah, there's
which
actually
is
a lot of
county health
partners
agency
that work on that program.
And they are there specifically for social emotional health. They are not dealing with career or scheduling or some of the other aspects that the counselors do, nor do they deal with educational testing that the school psychologist deals with. But focusing specifically on that, they have a different range of confidentiality. So mine is around harm to self or others. And that's a bit of a gray zone how you interpret that, especially around drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Some counselors are on the phone immediately with a parent if they hear beer or pot. You know, they just make the call, and then the connection with that student is kind of gone. The interventionist has the room, the latitude to remain confidential about those topics. So they have a broader range of what they can talk about and not report to parents, which is a very positive thing to keep the doors open.
And I believe all of the high schools have an interventionist on site, as well as most but not all of the middle schools, I believe.
Correct.
I think that's how it works.
And I think another component that sometimes we forget to talk about with that program, the full term is prevention and intervention specialists. So they're also working and doing a lot with some new groups. For example, Fairview and the prevention intervention team started working with a program called Sources of Strength that is really trying to change peer culture, and I'm not an expert on it, so I'll just speak a little bit, and train the students at Fairview to really be watchful and mindful of warning signs of suicide and depression and help access. And maybe you guys know more about that than I would. But the prevention side is another component, as much as the term is often called interventionist, but when I was in that role, I brought Coleys into both of my schools as part of the prevention efforts. So prevention being education and then helping to prevent the crisis from occurring, hopefully. And I think that's a really exciting thing that we have in our local area that not a lot of districts that I know of have that model going. It's really neat.
And our interventionist, Kathy Smith, just started this year a gay-straight alliance, or actually last year she started it. And as the video mentioned, the percentages for risky behavior, depression, and suicidality is greatly increased among that population.
That's right, and when we do the Youth Risk Behavior Survey every 2 years, which we've done for a number of years in the community, as well as nationally, we consistently see that certain marginalized groups like gay, lesbian students, Latino youth, there's a higher percentage of issues around all risk behaviors. That's right.
We actually talk about that in our presentations. We want to make sure to the kids that it's not the fact that they are part of that community that puts them at a higher risk, but it's because they're at risk for more risk factors such as abuse from like classmates or other things. So just because you are a part of the gay, lesbian community doesn't mean you're at a higher risk. It just means that you're at a higher risk of more risk factors, so abuse and trauma, bullying,
definitely.
Cyberbullying. We talk about that a lot in our presentation. So,
yeah. And we talked a little bit about substance use. I want to come back to that topic for a moment if I could. On the handout that's available at our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com, it talks about adolescent risk factors, and one of the biggest risk factors is actually substance abuse. There's a very high correlation between substance abuse and depression, as well as substance abuse and suicidal behavior. And so this is another area of concern. And what a lot of people don't know, for example, about marijuana is that it can actually cause depression in a person that's not depressed at all if they have chronic marijuana use. And it's quite common for children as well as adults to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol to try to deal with those feelings that are overwhelming, like feelings of depression. And so, if you're a parent and you see substance abuse with your kids, you really want to be aware that that may be a symptom of something even more than just the substance abuse itself. There may be other factors going on. And like we talked about before, we really want to be a little more forward-thinking about the idea of an assessment. Like they talked about in the video about if you break your leg, you go to a doctor. Just this afternoon, I had the pleasure of assessing a young boy that's from our community. He was 9 years of age when I met with him, and his parents brought him in because of a lot of anger issues that he was exhibiting. And after meeting with him and spending some time talking to him, it became very clear that what was actually going on for him was depression. And this is something that most parents don't know, and I just want to make this point about this because believe it or not, when we're diagnosing depression in adults, we always have to have sad mood, obviously, to make that diagnosis. That is not the case with children and adolescents. We can actually make the diagnosis of depression even if we have an absence of depressed mood, but significant irritability or anger. And it's very common, so when I do an assessment, for example, if anger is the referral issue, I always assess for depression. In fact, in our community, because of the high numbers, I assess for depression regardless of what the reason for referral is. But my point is that I think for a parent, it's really easy to miss because if you have an irritable, angry teen, I'm thinking the last thing you're doing is thinking, oh, my son or daughter's depressed. You're thinking more about grounding and consequences and so forth. And so we really want to have a little bit more insight there in terms of those issues. Is that something that you guys talk about too, the anger piece? And
Yes, I would say that one of the things that surprises people about our presentation is some of the risk factors and warning signs that aren't what people expect all of the time. A lot of times people do guess anger as a symptom of depression, but some are surprised that things other than sadness could indicate depression. So that's definitely something that we educate people about, to try and teach them not just sadness, but all of the other things that could indicate that a person is depressed or suicidal, like anger, of course, changes in behavior or interest, things like that. They talked about it on the video, things like sleeping a lot or just not being interested in spending time with your friends anymore or doing the activities you love. Things like that don't just necessarily mean that someone is moody. It could indicate depression.
And I want to go back to your point about the referrals towards like a mental health professional. One of the biggest things we touch on is like for parents, like you were saying, it's really hard to miss that stuff, and they just have to know that they aren't the bottom line. So they can't diagnose their child's depression. They have to like refer it to a doctor. So like that's one of the big things we touch on, is because so many people try and like, even with a friend, especially more around like kids, like talking with other kids who have depression, a lot of times people try to diagnose the illness for themselves, like about their friend, but oftentimes, and a lot of the times, they could be wrong, and you have to get that checked out by a professional. So you can't be the one to say that they are depressed, because you obviously don't have the training, medical training. Well, I'm sure you do, right? But
let's hope so. I'm
talking to like the parents and other kids in our community. So I just wanted to go back on that subject you were talking about. So.
Mm-hmm. And while we're on the subject, let's spend a few minutes talking about some of the warning signs of depression, and this is on that handout that's available online. Again, sad or irritable mood. And then really this is the next most common one, loss of interest in activities once enjoyed, which you were mentioning before as well. And keep in mind that feelings of sadness are normal. We all feel sad from time to time. The challenge is, where is that line between normal sadness and clinical depression? And so these are some of the things that we look for, but generally speaking, we're looking at daily functioning. If someone is having trouble functioning at school, functioning at home, dealing with their responsibilities, these are some indicators right off the bat, but we do look for specific symptoms. We expect that the mood issues are going on for at least 2 weeks. That kind of separates out a lot of people. You'd be surprised how many people, when you ask them, have you been feeling sad most of the day, nearly every day for 2 weeks in a row in the last 6 months, that really separates out people that have significant depression and people that are just kind of normally sad. And so that's a really helpful one. The other thing that was mentioned earlier is changes in appetite or weight. Now this can go either way. People eating more than they normally eat, people eating less than they normally eat. The other thing that's very common, this little 9-year-old boy certainly had this symptom, difficulty sleeping or oversleeping, changes in sleeping pattern. Loss of energy, difficulty concentrating. This is an interesting symptom because sometimes I think kids are misdiagnosed, believe it or not, with ADHD because they have concentration problems. And again, this is why we really want to have a thorough assessment by a mental health professional. It's really a good starting place. If you have the slightest concern, just like you would for a physical problem, you would go to a medical doctor. It's very wise to find a licensed mental health professional who has expertise working with that age population of your son or daughter to get them assessed. It's a quick process. It takes less than a couple hours to do comprehensively. It's not too expensive, and certainly better safe than sorry, because we want to connect folks with depression with treatment, because treatment can be very effective. And so we want them to be helped with that. In terms of treatment, I just want to touch on that briefly. For depression, there's basically 2 kinds of treatment. Talk therapy, like meeting with a psychotherapist, and medication. And this can be confusing for people in terms of which way to go. And it's some of it's personal choice, and some of it is severity of symptoms. If a person literally cannot get out of bed because of severe depression, talk therapy is not going to be too effective. They can't even get out of bed to go talk to the therapist. So in a situation like that, or if we're seeing some significant suicidality in terms of behavior or thinking, those are some of the issues that we think about in terms of possible medication. The other thing that's true, and it's very tough to figure out which camp people fit into, is for some folks, it's primarily a biochemical imbalance, that there is a biochemical imbalance that they have that triggers these symptoms. And in that case, medication is even more critical. But we do know for most people, talk therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy through research, can be as effective as medication to treat depression. But the point is, there are treatments out there, and we really want to address these issues if we notice them in our children. Any other thoughts from the panel about symptoms of depression before we move on?
I just wanted to say a lot of people overlook how you were talking about sleeping. A lot of people will overlook the under part, so like especially with like kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. So like if someone's anorexic, that might mean they're depressed, but a lot of times like when you eat more, that could also mean you're depressed. So I just want to make sure that people know that it can go both ways with what you were saying with the symptoms.
That's right.
Because that's very hard to you can overlook that easily. If someone's not sleeping a lot, they could just be stressed out from school, but you never know.
The other thing, which is not talked about that much, but we should really touch on, is sometimes there's just a real shift in a person's life. One tragic example in our community was a young man who was a star football player at CU, and he had an injury and he could no longer play, and that actually led to his eventual successful suicide. And so these are other areas too. Someone has a traumatic event in their life, unplanned pregnancy. There's a lot on that list. So we really want to be sensitive to some of these issues in terms of their impacts.
I think another warning sign too that we talk about with Jason Foundation is, and I think you guys talk about it in Coley's, making final arrangements. So that might be giving away of beloved belongings or something that had been very special, or even to the point of making funeral arrangements and planning them out and telling them to your best friend, when I die, I want this song to be played at my funeral, or other kinds of things that might kind of spark a parent or an adult to ask a couple more questions and wonder about that.
And this is more warning signs about suicide
that
than
is
depression,
true.
right?
I jumped ahead, didn't I?
Well, let's talk about that because that's important too. There's also some information on the handout about that. In addition to symptoms of depression, talking about death, saying that someone wants to die, suicidal thoughts, plans, or fantasies. When we assess for suicide, we ask a lot of questions about this issue because if someone has a specific plan, we're a little bit more concerned than if they just have this general feeling. And so we look at these issues as well. As Julie mentioned, giving away possessions. Sometimes what we see, which is really confusing to people around the person suffering from depression, is they appear to be in a great mood. Their depression is lifted. And that can sometimes be because they've made that decision in their mind that they're going to do this, and so they feel a great weight has been lifted. And so for loved ones, often they get the exact opposite message. They think, oh, so-and-so is feeling fine now. He seems very happy, or she seems not to be depressed anymore. So we want to be careful about that as well.
Yeah, that's probably the scariest one. That's the one that I think is probably the worst, is because so many people overlook that as happiness. But if you're depressed for months and months and months, there's no way you can jump out of it in just one day or 2 days. It's a very long and timid process. And I think going back to your other warning signs for suicide, I think one you missed was access to pills or weapons. So that's a really big one. Yeah. If someone has a means and they have a method, then there's really nothing stopping them from committing suicide.
And I know there's been a lot of talk about gun control lately.
Yes.
In our country. And however you feel about that, the fact is, which is really a sobering statistic, if there's a gun in your house, you're 5 times more likely to have a suicide in that house than if there wasn't a gun. So something that we really have to be thoughtful about, regardless of reviews on gun control. It's important that those guns are really secure, locked up, out of reach from anyone.
A statistic I think that a lot of people don't recognize is that 3/4 of all of the gun deaths in this state are suicides. So that that just dramatizes the point you're making about the access to guns, that that is a real eye-opener. This is much more frequent in Colorado than it is in other states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a sobering statistic. Keep in mind, if you're watching from home, we'd love to hear from you. We have a few minutes left in our program. You can go online to www.boulderpsychologicalservices.com, click on the Submit Questions icon, and we'll have our panel try to answer your questions for you. Also, keep in mind that this show will be archived. If you're watching and you think someone else you know might benefit from this information, the program that you're watching now will be posted on the BVSD website, bvsd.org. It's also linked to on the Boulder Psychological Services website as well, in addition to all the programs that we've done out of the boardroom here at BVSD, so please feel free to take a look at that. I also want to let you know that there's some events coming up, and I'm hoping that you guys from Coley's know about this because I really don't. There's a couple of fundraisers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about them?
So one fundraiser we have coming up is the prom dress fundraiser. Yep. So what we're doing is we're going around asking the community members if they would care to donate old prom dresses that have only been worn once or twice, and so they would donate them to us, and then we would sell them at
on April 6th at
April
Centaurus
6th,
High School.
You can take over. I don't know much.
Basically what we're doing is taking dresses, some are used, some are new. Several clothing shops have very generously donated us prom dresses, brand new prom dresses, and we're repricing them much lower than their retail value, even though all of them are new or of new quality. And then we're reselling them Saturday, April 6th at Centaurus High School, and all of the proceeds will go to Coley's Closet and then the Second Wind Fund, organizations like that. So please, if you have any prom dresses you'd like to donate, or if you know anyone who wants to buy one, tell them about our sale.
Thank you. And then something else that I heard about, something about Noodles on May 3rd.
Yes, May 3rd, we are having a dinner at Noodles in Boulder. If you go, I believe it's in the evening hours?
Yeah, I think it's from I think it's like from 4 till like whenever it closes.
4 till 10.
Yeah, if you just go in and mention our name, then you get I think 15% of the
the proceeds of your meal will go towards Coley's Closet.
So that will be very helpful.
Appreciate that information.
Is that any Noodles in Boulder, or is that a particular one?
I believe it's a specific location.
The one on 29th, I think, is
29th Street.
The one we're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know.
The other thing that's really, we're focusing on adolescent depression, but I think one of the most disturbing statistics in this area, and it's so hard to believe when you hear it, but the fastest growing group in terms of age that are committing suicide, believe it or not, are 10 to 14 years old. 10 to 14 years old. So these are kids that are middle school, early high school. I think a lot of times as parents we have the false assumption that, these issues become more of a concern when kids hit high school and don't realize that actually middle school is where a lot of these issues begin, whether it's experimentation with drugs or alcohol, cutting behavior, suicidal thinking, etc.
Yeah, that's been very dramatic in my 18 years at Southern Hills. It would be a rare occasion years ago that we would hear about these things in 8th grade. Then it moved to 7th grade, then to 6th. And now when I do transition meetings with elementary schools, I hear about 5th graders that are cutting or 5th graders that have had suicidal ideation. Last 10 years in particular, it's been a noticeable downward in age trend.
And, unfortunately, there's tremendous stigma around suicide and depression to some degree as well. And I think that, in a way, is our biggest challenge as a community, is how to kind of beat back that stigma. And I think all of the groups that are represented here today are really doing tremendous things to help with that, to get the word out and to reduce that stigma.
One thing I wanted to mention also, I think it can feel really overwhelming and daunting as a parent because you're hearing the statistics and they're very scary. And as we've brought up, I think getting your child connected to a licensed mental health professional for assessment is certainly something that makes sense if you're concerned about depression or thoughts of suicide. But something really easy you could do quickly tonight that I wanted to tell you about is that Jason Foundation has an app. So for people who have smartphones, it's called a friend asks, and this is something that your child can have on their phone. So your youth, your middle schooler, your high schooler, and it's really easy to use. It's a free app, and it has on there some what to do's and what not to do's for youth, because I think what we're learning is that students and youth often know more than we do as the grown-ups, meaning that they might know that somebody's confided in them that they're feeling depressed. They might know, they might be able to notice things that we wouldn't notice as the adults in their lives. So this is really specific for youth, and it has what to ask a friend if you're concerned about depression or suicide, what not to do. For example, don't promise to keep a secret. It has a Get Help Now button that goes straight to 1-800 Talk Now, I believe, which is a national anonymous suicide hotline, and it's just kind of right there at the palm of their hand. So I think as parents who are feeling, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you need something to do tonight after seeing this webcast, that's a quick thing that you can equip your youth and adolescent to have with them. If they're at a party, if they're even studying together with a friend of theirs, so that they have that information at their fingertips, as well as it also has some suggestions for community resources or people who could be good people to connect your friend with, which I think really is, there's a lot of power in equipping our youth. I love having the Coley's guys here, and I think the more students and adolescents that we can have educated and able to access resources really is helping all of us in preventing death by suicide, but also really increasing awareness around depression and helping that treatment that you talked about, Jan, come into place earlier on.
And interestingly enough, I've had this conversation with teens over the years, and I know it's true. When you talk to teens about, how they need to talk to somebody when they're having problems, well, they do. They talk to their friends. Yeah. And I think that's a tremendous burden sometimes on those friends. And I was wondering if anyone on the panel has any advice for youth out there who maybe have a friend that they're worried about, and how do you deal with that? And you don't want to betray their trust. And what can we offer for advice there?
Well, that's definitely a big topic of our presentation when we reach out to the kids. And I think I can speak for all of Coley's when we say the number one thing you can do is, no matter if you make a promise or not, just tell a trusted adult, because it's better to lose a friend for however long because they're mad at you than to lose them for a lifetime because of suicide. So if they tell you that they're feeling depressed and having suicidal thoughts, don't keep that information in. The number one thing you can do is just tell somebody. That could be anyone from a counselor, I know you guys deal with that a lot, an interventionist, a religious figure. I know my football coach, I always give that example in class, is my number one trusted adult that I can go and talk to, and he will help me out with finding the right resources. So that's a big thing that we suggest to all the kids out there that have a friend that has confided those feelings in you.
Yeah, one thing we say a lot is, you are the lifeline, you are not the bottom line. So just because if you are a teenager and someone comes and tells you that they're depressed or suicidal, it's absolutely, you need to get them help, but it's not your job to be that help, because of course I don't know of any teenagers who are trained mental health professionals, and those are the only people who can diagnose depression and who can prescribe medication or talk therapy, whatever treatment is needed to fix the issue. So really, no matter how well-meaning teenagers are, they can't solve the problem by themselves. They need to go to a trusted adult, find a therapist, help their friend get the help that they need, but they can't be that help by themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a challenge that a lot of kids find themselves in, don't you? Where they are in that. And that's why it's so great that you guys are giving that information, so that if and when it happens to them, they have an idea of what to do.
It really is, because kids that are just finding out about, friendships, and we're getting into the world of adulthood, I think trust is a big thing that nobody really wants to betray. But, at a point, it's is the information I'm holding affecting this person's mental well-being? And if it is, then you seriously need to let that information out, because it's not, at that point, it's not betraying your friend's trust. At that point, it's doing the right thing. So that's what these kids need to know nowadays, is that you have to look for help in this kind of situation.
And we just have a couple minutes left, so I want to, first of all, thank our wonderful panel for being here tonight. Time always flies on this show somehow. And for those watching in our audience, again, just keep in mind, if you're a parent of a child or adolescent, one of the most powerful tools that we have that we underutilize is the power of communication. We know through research consistently that when parents talk to their kids about any at-risk behavior over time and in an ongoing, respectful fashion, the chances of that child engaging in those behaviors is dramatically reduced. And there's nothing wrong, even if you don't suspect anything is wrong with your child, there's nothing wrong with having the conversation of, you know, what do you do when you're feeling sad? Do you feel sad a lot? You know, just to kind of touch on that subject and open up that conversation. Because I think too often we don't have those conversations with our kids until it's a crisis. And we certainly, the whole idea tonight, and I think you're hearing it from a lot of our panelists, is ideally we want to intervene early in the process. And that takes a collaborative effort on the part of families, school personnel, community resources. But I think together we have a real strength here, but we want to draw on those strengths. If you're interested in learning more about any of the groups that we talked about tonight, the Hope Coalition of Boulder County, the Second Wind Fund of Boulder County, Coley's Closet, their contact information is on our website. And these are groups that you can help financially through donations, but also you can get directly involved with these groups as well. And I think you'd find it very rewarding if you did so. I also want to let you know that our last television presentation for the school year will be on May 20th. The topic is tobacco, alcohol, and prescription medication, legal and lethal. And this will be an opportunity to learn more about the devastating impacts of these quote-unquote legal drugs and how to keep our children safe. It'll be moderated by Leisha Connors-Bauer from the Boulder County Healthy Youth Alliance. We also have some workshops coming up. This week, on the 21st of March, Understanding and Managing Sibling Rivalry. This will be an opportunity to talk about the age-old challenge of sibling rivalry. While there's no cure, there's ways to reduce the problem. And that'll be at the Louisville Library this Thursday, March 21st from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And we'll also be doing a talk on anxiety disorders at the Meadows Branch Library on Monday, April 8th, where you'll be able to increase your understanding of anxiety disorders from symptoms to treatment. And this is not just around parenting, but also adults that are struggling with anxiety issues. If that's a topic of interest, please join us at the Meadows Branch Library on Monday, April 8th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. I want to thank again our wonderful panelists for being here tonight and the hundreds of people in our live audience. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
And soon the growth returns to follow ground. But I know what's churning underneath the snow. And I love my baby and we've miles to go. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Be with me. We'll beat this, can't you see? So wait a while, winter time.